I am a professional. Anyways, so Truck Talks, might change the name, don't know, but we're talking about things that I think are important at the time, and this isn't truck politics. This isn't redneck pissed off in my truck talking about Obama and pissing me off. All right, you get the reference, good for you. If you don't be offended. So one of the things I've been thinking about is programming, right? So we'll talk like strength conditioning. I guess we could talk like general fitness, right? But I'm doing a whole strength conditioning thing right now, so that's what I'm gonna talk about. So I've had like a few, we'll say events or questions, looking at the chemtrails, pop up, right? Where it's saying it effectively, you know, write a program for XYZ, or like I've had to do like an assignment for my master's or something, or I've had to write this program, right? And in one way or another, the program is evaluated, right? It's evaluated by another coach looking at it and say, yeah, this is good or bad. It's evaluated by a professor looking at it and saying, yeah, this is good or bad. It's evaluated by a person or an athlete looking at it and saying, okay, yeah, I understand this. Or it's evaluated ultimately by whether or not it works after implementation, right? So the issue is that, so lately I've been given assignments and with basically no parameters, saying write a program for this and then justify it, right? So the most practical example lately is I had to compare the differences between speed and agility, right? And to me, having been an athlete and trained athletes and worked in the industry for as much time as I have, that's not a hard thing, right? Speed is point A to point B as fast as you possibly can, right? That's not hard. That's not a hard concept to understand. It's not a hard concept to explain. Some people would say it's hard to teach, but I don't think so. But it's like, it's that simple. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that, right? Because you haven't specified your question very well, aside from tell me what it is, right? And agility is point A to B to A as fast as you can while reacting to some type of stimulus that gives you input on direction, right? So it's not exclusively A to B to A. That's more like, you know, change of direction, but we're assuming agility for like athletes, right? That was kind of the frame of the question and talking about mechanics and everything. So it's like, I could write a program for speed. If you just said, hey, write a speed program. So like, for example, this weekend I have to write a plyometric program for jiu-jitsu athletes, right? And I'm gonna write that up. But the thing is these are theoretical athletes, right? I have no testing data. So like, let's even assume a coach had to do this and it wasn't theoretical, right? Like, let's say there's their actual athletes. How on earth are you gonna write any kind of program without any kind of testing data for those athletes? How are you going to write any kind of program without any movement assessment data? How are you going to do it without actually looking at them and evaluating and watching them in one way or another? Because you might have, let's say, 100 different agility exercises. For example, we could talk about strength, we could talk about hypertrophy, whatever it is. You could have 100 different agility exercises. And we'll say 1,000 possible combinations of agility exercises. So long as that program progresses an athlete over time in complexity or difficulty loosely, I'll use that loosely, of that particular session or sessions over a time period, you cannot look at it and say this is wrong or this isn't right. You can't do that because let's say I progress from 10 hurdle jumps to 12 hurdle jumps, and that was my whole program. You can't tell me that's wrong because that could have been the exact volume needed for that athlete. That could have been the exact intensity needed for that athlete. Now, you could probably look at it generally, if you have any kind of knowledge of strength and conditioning, and say that, yeah, you know, that's probably not the best. It could have been more dynamic. It could have done this better. You could have included this, and that. Sure. But you can't just objectively tell me it's wrong, right? So you could say, write an exercise program for jiu-jitsu, and I could write something out, and I could have my rationale for that. And you could say, well, this isn't really that good. Like, it doesn't consider these things. But you can't tell me it's wrong unless you know who it's being written for, in what time, and why, right? Right, so I, writing out that program or whatever it is, should be able to articulate the reasons that I did that. Now, you could say, in any of these programs, you could say that based on me having done what you wrote out before and me now doing this and knowing that this is better, I can say that what it is that you wrote out isn't the greatest thing. You can completely say that. That's valid. No problems there. No qualms. You could also say that you wrote out this program and I've been doing it this way for a long time, and I have proof that the way that I'm doing it works, and I have pretty strong indicator that the way that you wrote this out won't work as well based on all of my time doing this and seeing success with the people that I'm working with. You could totally say that, no problem. But with both of those things, you still can't say that what was written out was wrong unless you have definitive parameters for the program that whatever coach writing out whatever was wrong about. So here's a one more example there. It's like, you could say, for example, that the program that you wrote out doesn't address, let's say, tissue quality in this range. Like, you could say something like that. You could get really specific. Or you could say, this program doesn't seem like it's going to best challenge the metabolic adaptations that we want to see with our energy systems and our athletes. It's like, okay, maybe there is a better way to do that, sure. But when it comes back to it, you still can't say that the entirety of the programming is wrong. You can't do that. And it's like, I'm not saying this because I have a problem with somebody telling me I'm wrong. It's just, it's frustrating when there's non-clearly defined parameters and you're expected to be able to write something. Because in my brain, I could write out, 10 exercises right now for a dynamic warm-up, and you couldn't tell me it's not a dynamic warm-up so long as the athlete got warm, right? Now, I know there's a good way to do it and a wrong way to do it, but another thing to think about, right? So like, I've been having to build a program, a weightlifting-based program for, I don't know, I think it's like 8 weeks for jiu-jitsu athletes, because those are the athletes that I chose to work with, right? So I came up with a set of, in a previous class, I came up with a set of testing criteria, like a testing battery for these athletes based on normative data. And for whatever normative data I couldn't find, I had to pull from whatever was available in the literature and kind of average out things where I needed to make it applicable, and then scale and account for the fact that the prospective athletes that I was working with in this theoretical application don't have any training history, right? So there are some parameters right there that guides me, right? But so I'm having to base this around the tier system, right? There's a coach I think he's currently or previously was the coach for the Carolina Panthers, the head strength and conditioning coach. He's the one that built the tier system, right? And it's based specifically off of Coach Brulette. I think it's freaking French. Coach Brulette's method, right? And so the entire understanding of the tier system is it's almost like tier combined with conjugate, because I'm not positive if the tier system is built specifically off of conjugate, but they're very, very similar. Like, I don't know if Louis Simmons would say the tier system that they're doing is conjugate, and I don't know if the coach that created the tier system would say, yeah, I based this off of conjugate, right? Because you have a max force day, right? You've got a dynamic effort day, and then you have a repetitive effort day, just like in the conjugate system, right? Or not necessarily just a day, but you have those focuses within the microcycle. So, right, and the microcycle might just be for that day, right? Or it could be the whole week. But anyway, so the main focus of this is that whatever your focus is for the day, so like with a 3-day program during the week, is that I have either a total body focus, an upper body focus, or a lower body focus. Those are my dominating movements. And everything else within that day has to fit within that main focus, meaning the exercises that I pick lower on down in the day for the dynamic effort or the repetitive effort need to complement my dominating movement of the day, right? So like, if my total body movement was a power snatch, whatever other exercises I do within that day, I need to be able to articulate, as per these parameters, that it benefits that exercise, right? If my dominating movement of the day was the squat, the back squat, I need to show how these exercises complement that, okay? First of all, I don't necessarily think that's a phenomenal way to program outside of like powerlifting, right? But mostly just because you can say that with more advanced athletes, you need more volume within that particular movement direction, right? So vertical push, horizontal pull, hinge dominant type movement. You need more emphasis there to get the volume, right? I totally understand that. But if you consider who it is that I chose to work with, like non-experienced weightlifters, like, you can't tell me that because my main dominating movement is a barbell push press on day 2, you can't tell me that because I chose to use power med ball chest tosses as a dynamic type of effort, you can't tell me that that's not specific enough to benefit the overhead press in the form of the push press. You can't tell me, because they're new athletes, meaning they're going to get the neurological adaptation, and there's going to be transfer. I don't know if lateral transfer would be the right term, but there's 100% going to be transfer between power development of the pecs and the horizontal plane and my vertical application of force. Like, I don't think that anybody anywhere, unless it's available in the literature and I'm not aware of it yet, could tell me that there's not going to be benefit there. Even with advanced athletes, right? I would just think that it's more like a kind of an asymptotic curve as far as gain of benefits. The more advanced an athlete gets, you might have to get a lot more specific. But if I take a new athlete and I have them do a power med ball chest toss, specifically for power development of the pecs, or the chest or the pressing movement, then it doesn't make any sense to me how it's not going to transfer into push press or push jerk, whatever it is that I was doing for that day, right? It's the same thing. It's like, you can't tell me that if my dominating leg movement is, we'll say a barbell deadlift, like we'll just say a conventional barbell deadlift, you can't tell me that if I'm doing freaking counter movement jumps, like just vertical jumps, like repetition effort vertical jumps, you can't tell me that's not going to go into my deadlift just because it doesn't like replicate the movement, or it's not exactly hingy. Like, if I'm training the stretch reflex and I'm training my ability to produce force quickly, that's going to transfer into my training of my deadlift. That kind of stuff just frustrates me. And the point is that it's really hard, I think, in strength conditioning or personal training to be able to say, this is wrong, this doesn't make sense, this is better, because there are so many variables that have to be considered. And so it's like, I was taught very on personal training school that in programming, nothing's really ever right or wrong so long as you can justify it, right? And that makes sense to me now, because now that I understand, it's like, I can justify things. It might not be the best possible solution, and that's really the dilemma, is how do I as a coach know that whatever my programming is that I'm delivering to my athletes or clients or whoever it is, how do I know that that's the best possible thing for that athlete at that time in that place, and it's going to produce the best adaptation at the time that I want it to? That's the hard part. And I think you just get into a lot of opinion with coaches. Now, this is kind of where anecdotal evidence becomes really, really important, because just because it's not in the research literature doesn't mean that it's not valuable and it doesn't have its place, right? Like, I don't think neurotyping is, that Christian Thibodeau created, I don't think that is, you could say, validated in the research, but it makes a whole lot of freaking sense, right? It's like, I read into that this last week, and I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. I'm a 1B. Yeah, that's how I train. That's how my body is. That's how my body responds. I intuitively know that, having been an athlete of some type most of my life, right? I intuitively know that, but now that I have a way to define that and some parameters to better understand that, it helps me, right? So I don't think you can disagree with that. But now, regarding the anecdotal evidence, like, you could have a coach that's been coaching for a really long time and has tons of success with their athletes, which I think is also really hard to measure, but they have tons of success. And they could say, I've been doing my programming this way for a long time and it freaking works, right? Then it's like, how do you argue that at all? Like, or why are you arguing it, right? Just maybe for development of a young coach, but there's this one coach I'm working with right now, and I like all the coaches that I work with, but he does most of his stuff, like a lot of it's based off of Mike Boyle's type of programming. There's a lot of unilateral dominant type stuff. There's a lot of contralateral stuff, single-sided type of training, a lot of anti-rotations, a lot more, I'd say, multi-planar than most coaches train. And it works with the athletes, like, so long as I know, right? It's like, it's hard to evaluate if it actually works, because I can see improvement in the program, but I can't necessarily guarantee that improvement in the program over the year that the athletes have been training transferred into the sport. Like, I don't have a definitive way to measure that aside from performance assessments, but I can't tell you that the half kneeling cable chops and lifts that this athlete was doing was a contributing factor to them smashing 2 more homes run this year than they did last year. Like, I just don't think you could say that. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to being wrong, but that's kind of where my brain is at right now. And that's the point of these conversations, right? And then you take another coach that I'm working with, and he's like a lot more barbell dominant on a lot of his lifts, and There's a lot more plyometric type stuff involved, whereas the other coach doesn't have that. And granted, they're different sports, but there's always overlap in sports, right? And he gets good results with them, so it's like it's good training as far as I'm concerned, right? So long as the athletes are coming in, they're showing up, they're getting better. You got good relationships with them, nobody's getting hurt, right? I think those are all good parameters. I don't think you can argue it. So it's like I don't really understand why there's so much maybe competitiveness in my head. It's probably specific to my head about coaches talking about the best possible methods and everything. I think I have a lot of that. Maybe we'll say residual defensiveness. You could probably say I think that's honest. From when I was younger, where I was really passionate about what it was that I was doing and what the training methodologies that I had used and had learned. I was really passionate about those because they had worked for me, and so I thought I was right, and I thought that was the best way that you should do everything. And so I pushed that out onto other coaches, and it's why nobody really liked hanging around with me, aside from other reasons. I'm ugly, right? But I do think it's important to know, there's probably still some of that, but I'm just thinking about it from a holistic perspective now. In that, how do I know that when I go off and I work with this team that I'm going to give them the absolute best thing, and how do I also not overthink that? And I do that with testing and data, right? But that's all I got for today. Again, not all these conversations are going to go somewhere. It's just me talking and figuring stuff out. So hope you enjoy the chemtrail sky in the back, and good luck.